Welcome to the Zweigletter Podcast, putting architectural, engineering, planning, and environmental consulting advice and guidance in your ear. Zweig Group's team of experts have spent more than 3 decades elevating the industry by helping AEP and environmental consulting firms thrive. And these podcasts deliver invaluable management, industry, client, marketing, and HR advice directly to you, free of charge. The Zweigletter Podcasts, elevating the design industry one episode at a time.
Water is something most people take for granted until something goes wrong. But behind every clean river, every treated gallon, every healthy watershed, there are engineers who've dedicated their careers to making sure the system holds. My guest today made a journey most people couldn't imagine. From Nepal to becoming a vice president and wastewater sector leader at Stantec, one of the largest engineering and design firms in the world. Pusker Regmi came to the United States to pursue water engineering, and he's never looked back. As sector leader for wastewater, Pusker oversees technical innovation, fosters client relationships, and leads teams delivering wastewater treatment and resource recovery solutions at scale. In 2025, he was awarded the Camp Applied Research Award from the Water Environment Foundation, one of the most prestigious recognitions in the field. It's kind of like the Oscars, for his contributions to process intensification in wastewater treatment. And right now, Pusker and Stantec are in the middle of something genuinely exciting, a 30-month Water Research Foundation initiative partnered with WSCSC Water and Prince William Water, which combines engineering experience with advanced AI architecture to translate treatment data into real-time operational guidance. They're calling it the era of intelligent assets. I'm also joined today by my co-host and partner in crime, Luke Carruthers, Senior Content Manager and Editor with Zweig Group. Pusker, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Man, it is certainly a pleasure. I really want to get started and kind of jump into some of your experience and background, but we always like to start here on the Zweigletter Podcast with a superhero origin story. And so you grew up in Nepal and came to the United States, as I said earlier, to pursue water engineering. That's a huge move. It's not even a big move. It's a huge move and a very specific calling. What drew you to water, and what was that journey like?
No, that's a really awesome question. And to be honest, I didn't start as a water engineer. My background is electrical engineering. That's what I did during my undergrad. But in the final year of my studies, I was volunteering for Center for Pollution Studies back home in Nepal. And my role was to go out and give lectures to elementary and middle school children around sanitation, water, safe drinking water, things like that. And that became sort of like a huge calling for me. I didn't realize the impact water can have in one's life. And being, a developing country, Nepal has a lot of water challenges. And that instantly drew me in a sense that I saw the impact of water and the immediate, results that you can see in communities around you, right? And that was not available for me when, through my electrical engineering kind of a training. So I decided to pursue water engineering and came to the United States to do that. And I stumbled in wastewater, which is a specific kind of a domain by itself, and fell in love with research and, translating that research into full-scale systems and so forth. So that is sort of my origin story. And I'm keeping the same spirit alive, day to day still.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's important, especially for young practitioners in the AEC space, engineers and architects for that matter, to understand that sometimes you can pivot, right? I mean, you were in school, you were, like, as we like to say, the cool kids like to say, a double E, and then you decided to go into the wastewater aspect of it. And I think it's important. And what shouldn't be lost is why you looked at water and wastewater so passionately because of your experience growing up in Nepal and what that represented for you. Because I was telling Lucas earlier on our pre-call that, I think a lot of times in developed countries, we sometimes take for granted a lot of the resources that we have at our disposal. Like I flip on my sink every day and I expect clear water to come out. But I know, because I've been around the world, I've been to Africa and other places, that's not always the case. Matter of fact, you may not even have a sink to flip on and turn on. And so I think that just understanding why, the work that you do in the water wastewater region is so important, and why we want to continue to encourage people, especially in the AEC space, especially engineers, to get involved with, to this specialty in this area, because it's important for everybody. I don't think there is not a person on this planet that doesn't value clean water.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. And the other side to that is, like until nothing breaks or becomes a news, in the developed world, we take like water for granted, right? Everything works, flush down, everything disappears. You have a running water. But when things go wrong, then it matters. And there's a whole industry that keeps this, kind of running. And I'm definitely part of that system. And what we are faced with right now is aging infrastructure, right? In the United States, a lot of infrastructure was built in the last 60, 70 years, and they're getting old, right? So is our workforce in some ways, right? They have been operating these complex systems. And that's why I think the topic of today, AI, is such an important topic. How we can bring life to old infrastructure. How do we retain like knowledge that we have of the operators of our systems? That is all important topic.
Yeah. And I had a chance to do a little bit of background research on you, and I've heard you talk and write about the importance of the waste, what being a wastewater engineer is all about, and how sometimes it's an area, it's a profession, it's a field that's sometimes misunderstood. I'd love for you to talk about the value and importance of the area that you work in within engineering.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to tell everybody about like wastewater treatment, generally speaking, is that it's very complex and it draws from like several engineering and sciences discipline, right? We use like physics around like settling things. We have like clarifiers. We use chemistry to, remove some of the pollutants. We use like biological pathways to degrade pollutants and contaminants. And we bring all of this together in a discipline which is extremely complex, but also provides that intellectual pursuit for somebody who wants to do something cool with it, right? Even in my lifetime, in this career, I have seen a lot of breakthroughs that has happened. We have, invented, discovered like biological pathways that we didn't know like existed in the past. And we are doing treatment processes in full scale using those things. Isn't that like cool thing, And so for a young engineer, I think it provides a lot of, kind of opportunities to display their talents. And also, since inherently the field is complex, it requires like collaboration between like several disciplines and, cross-pollination of ideas. And that is what I find really fascinating about wastewater treatment,
Yeah. Lucas, you look like you had something you wanted to ask.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned the complexity of wastewater in general, and it doesn't get the recognition that it necessarily always does. But every time I've been writing about wastewater on and off for 6 years now, and it feels like there's always big advancements from a technological front that you wouldn't necessarily expect coming from that sector because it doesn't get the attention that others do. So from your perspective, like, what have those breakthroughs been, and kind of where are we going from that technology perspective?
Yeah, something that we have been collectively working in the wastewater space is process intensification. And process intensification is nothing than, doing more with less in less, meaning that you want to do more treatment in a smaller footprint by using less resources. And it's truly within the last 15 years or so, we have come up with like several processes, very like effective, sustainable, and, attractive, economically. These processes have come into the fold. And one of them, I'll name it, is Anammox. Anammox is a new biological pathway. These are like bacteria that we didn't know existed, 25 years ago, but now they are part of our treatment processes. And the cool thing about Anammox is it does not need like any aeration. And aeration is like energy, right? Like you put like air to the system. It does not like need any aeration, while it can degrade like nitrogen. It can use ammonia, anoxic conditions. It does not require like any carbon, which is also a footprint and emissions kind of a thing. So it has dramatically changed how we treat nitrogen from wastewater. And there are several processes that have come about. So that's one of the classic examples of new biology helping new technologies come forward.
That's cool. Well, I mean, obviously, as you say, since you mentioned it, new technologies coming forward. Obviously, the elephant in the room is AI. And I would love to talk about this subject as it pertains to the work that you do. I mean, AI is one of the most talked about forces reshaping the AEC industry right now. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to know, Pusker, from your vantage point as someone leading technological and technical innovations at Stantec, how is AI actually changing the way engineering projects get done?
Yeah, so AI is, to be honest with you, AI is kind of an upper layer of what we do, right? Like it's not the core of what we do. Our knowledge, our experience getting things done in, like full scale systems, that is not going away with AI. Anything like AI is making things more sharper for us, what is important, right? It's giving back some bandwidth to us. When it comes to the engineering side of things, we also tend to do a lot of tasks that are like repetitive, that are like heavy on your cognition, right? But it's not necessarily a fun work, It's a grind that we all have to do. So one of the things that AI does for us is it takes that load off of us and it gives some cognitive, bandwidth back. And that allows us to focus on something that is truly worth pursuing, right? That is important. And it's doing on the engineering kind of design side of things, as well as it's doing on the operation side of things when it comes to wastewater treatment, plans and processes.
Okay. All right. Lucas, you want to add anything to that?
No, I was going to say, I think that's the central anxiety when it comes to AI, I think, in the cultural moment, is that AI is going to somehow replace us. And I think it speaks to the future that it's going to make things sharper, right? So for maybe someone, a young engineer that's entering the industry, or maybe a mid-level engineer that's trying to reposition themselves, how can they make themselves used to these AI tools and kind of get better practice at understanding these ideas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that AI inherently will not do is it's not going to bring that judgment and taste elements to the table, right? So you using AI to train yourself, right, to kind of access things that you didn't have time to access is going to fundamentally make you a more, well-rounded like kind of engineer, right? It allows you to get that bandwidth back. And I think that's going to change the conversation. And the one thing that we have to do as a collective, though, to make sure that this happens is that we need to reward that kind of effort, right? Like where people are, like enhancing their judgment, they're increasing the ceiling of what is possible. And that needs to be recognized by the professional societies, our firms, and the schools, right? All of them need to reward that sort of a thinking, because AI is definitely raising the ceiling and it's making things possible that was not possible before. So if we are, throwing the same problem and expecting the same results, that is too limiting for AI. So we need to increase the ceiling of what is possible going forward, right? And we need to reward people putting their effort in increasing those judgment layers, and those difficult things that we might not have done before.
Hey, I'm curious to know, Pusker, is Stantec doing anything in the realm of training or upskilling for its employees that you've seen that's been really helpful? Maybe it's even helped you.
Yeah, so the Stantec, has the latest AI tools like Copilot and things like that. There has been some training around that for folks. It's readily available for everybody to use, and that has helped, right? But what I'm trying to say though is we need to take that like one step, further, in a sense that in today's day, I don't think we are limited by training. To be honest with you, training is everywhere. It's almost like a commodity. You can watch like YouTube videos. You can use even AI to train you. You can write an app, MIT level like tutor, and you can vibe code it and help you kind of educate on AI and everything. So it's not matter of like access anymore when it comes to AI and in these tools. It's like a system where we are trying to reward, right? That behavior of like training yourself, bringing value, increasing your judgment. I think that's where we need to focus more. And I think that is, slowly happening. But I think we need to be more intentional about that kind of a training and reward system.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And I hope that young engineers that are listening to this episode, that has to ring true with you. I mean, one of the things that the translation of everything that Pusker just said was that you have to be intentional and you have to kind of grab the bull by the horns, so to speak, in terms of gaining an understanding about those things that may either be foreign to you or you may not be sure exactly as it pertains to AI where that's going to lead. Like you said, Pusker, there are a million different videos I can watch. There are Coursera programs. There are programs on LinkedIn Learning. Just about every platform has training and education. And my encouragement to anybody watching this is to take some time, even if it's on your own time, to gain some understanding. And that will then go a long way in informing you when opportunities present themselves in the workplace, so that if you are working with someone like Pusker or somebody else that's working at a high level and thinking about things collectively, you will be ready to answer the call when they say, okay, I need a few more engineers to join me on a particular project, and who's with me? And you might be able to raise your hand and say, yep, sign me up, Pusker, and let me get involved with what you're doing. So I want to talk about the Water Research Foundation initiative with WSSC Water and Prince William Water. Can you kind of walk us through that what that project actually is, maybe trying to accomplish, and why this felt like the right moment to take it on?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, so the main thing here is AI models have advanced quite rapidly in the last 5 years, right? And everybody knows this. There are a lot of news around this. And there is a huge interest in reaping the benefits of these AI models that we have at our disposal now, right? And there is a race, so to speak, of building an application layer to make it useful in reality. But the gap that I see and we saw, when we came up with this project, is that how that application layer gets built. We are not building an application layer that we give to the utilities, right? We are trying to build it with them, working alongside them, right? And that's the difference. It's not like in a hypothetical problem that we are trying to solve. Hey, we came up with this like cool, gadget. Now you use it. We are trying to co-create that tool by the people who will be using this in the future, right? So that's the difference, with the Water Research Foundation project that we have. And the cool thing here is, it brings collectively like Stantec, our like AI partner, EOS, and these utilities. And we are like together building this tool, and we are like validating using like real problems by the real operators. So this is not going to be something that you give it to them. This is going to be like co-build, by them, from day one. So that's the key to this research.
And I'm assuming that it's not lost on you that other utilities and other organizations may come calling as you put this into practice and say, hey, sign us up, or hey, can you help us solve this same problem or something similar? And I always say that, venture favors the bold and opportunity. And so you guys are kind of at the cutting edge of this with Stantec and the work that you're doing, especially in the water wastewater space. Have you heard from other organizations that are saying, hey, we're keeping an eye on what you guys are doing, and we would be interested in maybe lining up as opportunities present themselves to pursue this at an even larger scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And even within the Water Research Foundation project that we have something called observing utilities panel. So there are like another 6, 7, utilities who will be watching us build these tools, and will be providing like regular updates. So the idea here is to refine that thinking, right? Like refine that layer by having more voices kind of vet it, and question it. We are really intentional about that. The two utilities we have are very very much wonderful like use case, but we want like more voices and more questioning on what we are doing. So that's part of the project as well.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, I want to add to this, and you're introducing the concept of, and I'm using air quotes now, intelligent assets through this work. And that's like a phrase that's going to maybe mean different things to different people in this audience. How do you define it, intelligent assets, and what does it look like when it's actually working in a treatment plant?
Yeah, so the assets are all we know the assets are there, right? Like if you go to a treatment plant, there are like several thousand of these, pieces of equipment, reactors, and so forth. But they are static and they don't have a knowledge component to it, right? But the operator is constantly building a knowledge base to operate, to maintain, and to make sure that it functions properly. So intelligent asset is combining that knowledge to go with a existing asset and to make it like durable long term. So it is not just a static thing, it's a dynamic thing that has its own knowledge that is retained and is like talking to the operators all the time, right? So now it becomes something that is long lasting, as opposed to when the experienced operator goes out of the door, you lose all the institutional knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucas, you got anything?
No, I was going to say, the idea of the intelligent asset, it kind of fascinates me because our response to infrastructure has always almost inherently been reactive, but this gives us the ability to be proactive. So this is kind of a high level take at maybe, but are we moving towards a future where infrastructure thinks?
Yeah, so I think the thinking comes from, again, that retention of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
As long as we have this layer that is like watching everything, remembering like all the events along its life and presenting the information when it's relevant, as long as that is happening, I think it's a very useful thing to have long term, right? So not necessarily like, kind of a Terminator way of like intelligence and a scary way, but in a way that is really useful for us going forward, right?
Yeah.
Well, man, I mean, Pusker, you've been involved in this industry for a while now. I'd be curious to know your general thoughts, right? Not necessarily talking about water, but just the AEC space in general. You can probably remember when things were probably more done by hand, when calculations were done by hand or a calculator or an HP, and now everything is on a computer. Everything is just kind of done differently. What are your thoughts about how this industry has evolved, and what are you most excited about for the profession and also for those young engineers that are matriculating out of college now and coming into a whole new engineering environment than what you experienced when you left Nepal and came here?
Yeah, so one thing that has increased is the appetite for trying new things in our industry. Our industry is heavily regulated, as you know, right? We are like, the first priority is always compliance and human health. That's non-negotiable for us. So we tend to be conservative in the past, but there is like a lot of like openness now in the industry to not try new things. And it's also, I think, the lot of new people who have at the digital first kind of a generation who grew up with like, internet and, iPads and so forth. They are like entering the workforce now. So they are like looking forward to bringing the same level of convenience to what we do, right? Because the internet, the old ways of doing things are like vanishing rapidly. So that is a perfect kind of a scenario to try out like even bigger things. And AI is definitely one of them, in my opinion, right? Where it can take the knowledge base that we have generated, all the access that internet provided, we can take it to the next level. So I think generally speaking, this is the right moment to try like even bigger things in our industry.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that knowledge. As AI becomes more embedded in our engineering services, what does that change about what clients expect from firms like Stantec when it comes to a project?
Yeah. So with AI, I think the fundamental thing that doesn't go away is like you still want a high quality work product, right? And the right judgment. Those are like still non-negotiable. But one of the things that I think we expect generally now is, more polished deliverables and more efficiency, so to speak, right? So we are bringing like a lot of number crunching, a lot of like maybe like even literature review to the table, and we are doing that efficiently and cleanly, so that expectation has increased, I think, overall in our industry, which is a good thing. Again, like now we will be focusing on not grammar or like polish, but the actual judgment becomes the topic, right? Which is a great thing in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We really appreciate the time that you've taken out of your busy schedule to talk with us today about this. If somebody listening to this conversation wants to get in connection with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I'm really active in LinkedIn. I write a lot and I share my thoughts, personal thoughts, professional thoughts. So that is the best way to connect. If you want to keep in touch with what we are doing with the Water Resource Foundation project, the project code is 5378. And then there is going to be like quarterly updates in the Water Resource Foundation website around that project as well. That's the best way to connect. And, I don't know if you are planning on putting my info at the end.
Yeah, we'll put all of this in the show notes. Our legion of listeners knows that they can go to zweigroup.com and click on the podcast link and they can get all the show notes, or they can just read the show notes directly on their podcast player of choice. So we'll make sure that you're fully covered. And our hope is that you're probably going to make several hundred new friends because of this podcast episode.
Perfect. So, thank you so much.
That's excellent. So Pusker, this has been a great conversation. What you're building at Stantec and what this WRF initiative represents is exactly the kind of work this industry needs to be paying attention to. The way you talk about AI as something that serves engineering judgment rather than replacing it, that's a perspective that I honestly hope a lot of people in this audience carry with them. So for anybody that's listening today, if this has sparked something, whether you're thinking about how your firm is approaching AI, how you're building client relationships around innovation, or just what it means to lead technical teams through a period of real change, I hope you'll share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. You can find the Zweig letter and everything Zweig Group has to offer the AEC industry at zweiggroup.com. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you back here soon with another new episode. Thanks again, Pusker. We really appreciate you, man, and we look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you so much, Luke. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zweig Letter Podcast. We hope that you can be part of elevating the industry and that you can apply our advice and information to your daily professional life. For a free digital subscription to the Zweig Letter, please visit thezweigletter.com/subscribe to gain more wisdom and inspiration, in addition to information about leadership, finance, HR, and marketing your firm. Subscribe today.